Good afternoon, and welcome to the Internet of Water's Peer-to-Peer Network Webinar. Today's webinar is actually about the peer-to-peer network. We're talking all about partnerships today, highlighting the work of our partners in California, New Mexico, and Texas. My name is Ashley Ward, and I'm the Engagement and Outreach Associate for the Internet of Water. And first, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes for the day. Just a friendly reminder that this webinar is being recorded. After the webinar, the recording and the slides that you see presented today will be posted to our website and a link sent to all of you who registered via email. If you have a technical question or need help during the webinar, please navigate to the chat function that's located at the bottom of your Zoom window, and a member of our team will respond and help you out. However, if you have a question for one of our panelists today, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll be sure to pass on your questions. After the panelists begin presenting, today we're going to hold all questions until the end of the panelist presentations. So just in case you're wondering when we're going to ask your question, that'll let you know. There are also a few of you that are participating in this webinar via WebEx. If you're using WebEx, please place all of your questions in the WebEx chat, and a member of our team will send them over to us in the Zoom. And so now I'd like to take a couple of moments to introduce a couple of members of the IoW team. We have David Bjorkback, who's helping us with WebEx, and Lily Watson, who's our program coordinator for the IoW, but the co-lead for the peer-to-peer network. And you're going to hear more from Lily in just a moment. And also Peter Callahan, our executive director. Peter, would you like to say a couple of words of welcome?
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. The peer-to-peer network is one of the most important aspects of the Internet of Water. It's the way that we interact and communicate with our community, really. And it's the way that we have created for you all to communicate with one another. Because an Internet of Water, in order for an Internet of Water to come into the world, we need all of you to participate and help us create it. It's not just a project at Duke University. It's not just a fancy idea. It's a group of people that are really working together through partnership. And that's what this webinar is all about. We have excellent panelists who know all about the Internet of Water, who've been in the weeds with us from the very beginning. Sam Hermit and Greg Gearhart are just fantastic partners. And so I look forward to hearing from them. I myself will be jumping off the call today a little bit early. I apologize for that, but I'm thrilled we're doing this. And thank you so much again for coming.
Thanks, Peter. And so finally, one more bit of housekeeping. For this webinar today, we're going to be using Poll Everywhere to gather information from all of you, but also to help foster discussion. And so to be sure that everyone is familiar with Poll Everywhere and how it works, we're going to do a test. Get ready. This is a very important question and actually will set the tone for the entire webinar. And we're going to settle a debate once and for all. And that is pineapple a pizza topping? This is a very important question. So in order to participate in Poll Everywhere, you're either going to log into Poll Everywhere at the email, at the web address above, which Lily will post in the chat, if you don't mind, Lily, or you can text your answer to Ashley Ward 973 using this code 37607, and then you select A for yes, pineapple is a pizza topping, or B, it is not. So we're going to give this a few minutes to see how this is working for everyone. Oh, so far, 100% of you, whoever answered, thank you, believes that pineapple is most definitely a pizza topping. So I'm going to give it we're going to pause for a moment and let everybody get a chance to practice with Poll Everywhere. Looks like a very strong preference for pineapple as a pizza topping. My husband will be thrilled. You all are going to settle an argument in our household at the same time. Oh, it's getting close now. Otto says no, it's absolutely not a pizza topping. Okay, if anybody had any problems with it looks like people are still logging on, but if you're having problems with the poll everywhere, be sure to send us a quick chat in the chat box and we'll do our best to help you out. But it looks like so far the respondents agree that pineapple is in fact a pizza topping, and I'm glad we have that settled now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the peer-to-peer network. Currently, we have about 100 members in the peer-to-peer network that represent 36 states. And you can see here the map of who we currently have represented in the peer-to-peer network. If your state isn't highlighted here, we would especially encourage you to join us, and we'll tell you how to do so in just a moment. We'd love to have representation from all 50 states. And even if your state is represented and you're not currently a member of the peer-to-peer network, we encourage you to join. And for those of you who already are members of the peer-to-peer network, to spread the word among your peers and your agencies and in other water agencies in your state. It really is the more the merrier. A robust peer network is an effective peer network. So we're trying to do our best to grow this nationwide so that all of you can share your activities, successes, lessons learned, challenges, frustrations, as you're moving toward this very important effort toward modernizing your water data infrastructure. So what does this current network look like? Right now, as you can see, there's a heavy representation among water quality and availability folks. I want to point out that we have very few members of tribal governments that are currently part of the network, and this is something we would really like to see grow. And if any of you have recommendations about how we can increase this participation, I would love to hear from you. Tribes often have very strong monitoring and data collection programs, and I believe would be wonderful contributors to the network and working with the state partners that we currently have in the network. As for the skill set among our network members, quite a bit in the data management, analysis, and visualization, and GIS and spatial modeling. Fieldwork and research also have a strong representation. Us understanding this sort of helps us develop programming and better understand the audience in the peer-to-peer network, which is why we ask you these questions when you register. And so I want to quickly tell you how do you register and where to find us. If you go to the Internet of Water website, internetofwater.org, you'll see, which is circled here, the peer-to-peer network link located under our Connect menu. This will change in the first of the year. In 2021, we're redesigning our website, and the peer-to-peer network will have a place on the main menu. So it'll be a little bit easier to find us after the first of the year, but that doesn't mean you should wait to join us. Go ahead and navigate to the Connect menu to the peer-to-peer network. And when you navigate here, you'll see this homepage where you can register. You see the register here button. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about what membership in the network can give for you, can give you. We host a series of webinars like this one, but on a variety of topics. So far, we've hosted an Ask the Data Architect where people submitted questions ahead of time to our data architect and he answered them, and also questions in real time. We hosted a California Water Budgeting Handbook webinar, which went really well. And we've also hosted a workshop on metadata through the network. We have several upcoming webinars, which I'll share with you in a moment. We also have spotlights where we highlight the work of members of the network, a forum, and Lily's going to talk to you about the forum in just a moment, and a directory. So let's talk a little bit about some of those upcoming webinars. We have two upcoming in January. I'm really excited about both of them. The first is on wastewater surveillance data infrastructure for COVID. We have folks from California, New York, and Utah, and maybe a few others who will be talking about the workflow, data workflow, and the data infrastructure that they're developing in their states to try and help out with wastewater surveillance for COVID. And then we have a really exciting project that's been going on in North Carolina. The North Carolina State Climate Office, along with the NOAA's RESA program of the Carolinas, initiated a pretty thorough, broad drought communications project in the Carolinas. So they're going to present on that work. The COVID workshops are a series, and so the second of that we hope will be in February. And then in March, Stacy Timmons, who is on this call today, will be talking to us about the New Mexico Water Data Initiative and all that they've done in New Mexico. So I hope that you will consider joining us and registering for these webinars. After the first quarter, to give you an idea of what we have coming up, we have our third in the series of COVID wastewater surveillance. We also have Adel Abdullah from WADE, from the Water Data Exchange of the Western States Water Council, is going to talk to us about WADE and their tools. We have folks from the USGS, the Hydro Network Link Data Index they're going to present on that tool, as well as the following webinar in July, GeoConnects, which is connected to that work at USGS. GeoConnects is a tool of the Internet of Water that links water data together by location, makes it easier to find. So we hope you'll keep on the lookout via our social media and our website for these upcoming webinars. If you have an idea or would like to present your work from your state in a webinar, please reach out to me or Lily. Our contact information is at the end of this slideshow. We also host spotlights of peer-to-peer members, and we would love to highlight your work as well. And so here's an example of what a spotlight looks like. We ask our participants to fill out a quick questionnaire answering 3 questions about your agency's challenges, lessons learned, or creative and innovative solutions that you've come up with. And we post these on the website and send it out through social media, as well as through our peer-to-peer network listserv. And we print that interview so that everybody can read it, and hopefully just another way of kind of sharing what people are doing in different places. Lily, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the forum.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Watson. I'm the program coordinator for IoW, and I'm going to tell you all a little bit about our peer-to-peer forum and how it works. So when you join the peer-to-peer network, you'll be automatically enrolled in the peer-to-peer forum. And it's a great place for you to ask questions of your peers, to get feedback on reports or processes that you're using, review software products that you're trying out, and just connect with different peers across the network. So once you've registered for the peer-to-peer network, you can access the forum by going to the peer-to-peer website page on our website and clicking the forum button, which you see here on the slide next to the big green arrow. Next slide. When you're not logged into the forum, this is what it'll look like. So what you're seeing here are our 2 public channels. The peer-to-peer forum, just like the peer-to-peer network, is open to government employees of state, local, or tribal governments, as well as river basin commissions and utilities. But these 2 public channels are open to anyone. So you can post in these channels and read all the posts without having to log in or create an account at all. In these posts, we have a general public discussion, and we have webinar, workshop, and conference news. We've also created a channel for this webinar, so you can see it next to this big green arrow here. And so we encourage all of you who are following along with me here, there's a link at the bottom of the screen, to go to that channel, and you can post and start having conversations about this webinar while it's happening and connect with some of your peers that way. To see all of the other channels in the forum, which are only open to forum members, you'll need to log in. To do that, you'll click on the login button, which you can see next to the green arrow on the top here. Next slide. And so this is what the forum will look like when you're actually logged in. So you can see we've got a lot more channels here. If you're following along and you don't see this screen, you'll just click this categories button next to the big green arrow on the top right of the page. That'll bring up all of the different categories that we have. We have a general discussion category where you can post anything at all related to data management or water data in general. And there's also a sub-channel in there called Introduce Yourself. We really encourage everyone to post in this channel, whether you're a first-time member of the network trying to connect with people, or whether you've been a member of the network for a long time and you're just new to the forum. It's a great way to introduce yourself, to find people with similar interests, and it helps newcomers get a sense for who's in the network. So we really encourage that. We also have a channel for data architecture, management, and integration. We have a channel for data applications, visualizations, and integration, where you can ask questions about any issues you're having with that, or tell people about your processes. We also have a channel for data sharing, where you can ask questions and share information about building and developing data portals. And we have our newest channel, which is software reviews. So that's a place to post reviews about any software options you're using for data management, analysis, or visualization. Next slide. And finally, to actually make a post in the forum, you'll just click on any of the channels that you're interested in posting in, and then you can either start a new topic or reply to somebody's existing post. So this is a post from one of our panelists today, Greg. And so when you reply to this post, there's lots of ways to get people's attention around your reply. If you want Greg to get an email that you've responded to him, or in any post, if you just want to tag Greg, you can do that by saying @ the person who you want to tag, and it'll pop up as you start writing it. If you want to see all of the posts related to a particular topic, you can choose to watch that topic. So there's a big green arrow here showing at the bottom right. You can select from the drop-down menu to decide to watch a post. If you think that somebody's post is just really, really great and you want to upvote it or alternatively downvote it, you can click on one of the arrows next to this green arrow on the upper right. So you can click that little up or little down arrow there to up or down vote. Or if you think somebody's posts are just really great and interesting and you want to see information about all of their posts ever, you can follow them. So to do that, you'll just click on the circle next to their name, which will either have their first initial or a photograph of them. And this pop-up menu that you see on the screen here will come up, and you can click the big green plus button to follow them. Next slide. And then finally, the forum also sends out monthly digests automatically. So every month you'll get an email about all of the recent posts in the forum. And so when the first time you log into the forum, you'll be asked to accept those settings. If you're a member of the network, but you've never logged into the forum, you won't be getting these emails. So you have to log in to start getting them. And if you think you're getting too many emails or not enough emails, you can change all of these settings. If you go to your name at the top right-hand corner of the screen and down to settings in the drop-down menu, you can choose to receive weekly digests. You can also change when you're notified. So as you can see, we don't have a ton of posts yet. This is a new forum, but we're really excited about it. We think it's a great place for you all to connect with each other. And so we really encourage you all to start posting. And we also are interested in learning about new channels that you'd like to hear about. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley to run a quick poll.
Okay, so this is our first real poll everywhere. We would like to get feedback from you about what kinds of topics you'd like to see discussed in the peer-to-peer forum. One of the things we're hoping to do in the coming months is to start to seed some of these topics that you've suggested. So in order to answer this poll, just as before, I believe you can use the same, you can actually do it just from where you were for the last poll, but you go to the website that's listed at the top of this slide, or go back to the same text message and Federation. I'm starting to see some of the results coming in. And then in the meantime, I also see there is a question in the Q&A. Just wanted to address Wilson Sheely's question about how to become an official member that can contribute data resources for water data. Wilson, we do not hold data at the Internet of Water. However, if you would join the network at the register on the Internet of Water peer-to-peer network page, I hope I'm addressing your question. You will be able to contribute either via the forum here, our webinars, or reaching out individually to partners. And so it looks like data communication, that's a really important one. Interoperability seems to be a nonstop issue. Watershed management, data standards, and transformation. What we're going to do with these is particularly experiences on how others have collaborated between agencies. Stacy is probably going to talk quite some about that. She is a go-to person about that. Data sharing, we're going to have a question about data sharing coming up as well. Let's see, I have one quick Q&A. I'm going to address that. Therapy for those difficult. The forum is our form of therapy. Thank you for bringing it up. So we have David Wegner says, can someone who works on and in the policy of water but does not produce water data join in the discussion? Absolutely. And, you know, because this is not a singular issue for just those who have hands-on water data management. This is also about decision makers and those who create policy that support those practices. So we would absolutely encourage anyone that in that entire spectrum, from policy to actual to data users to data producers, to join in. And so please pass on the word. Better understanding the needs of state agencies, that's a really good one. Water data legislation, goodness yes. Machine learning. Okay, so these are some great topics. And as we go forward in the coming months, we plan to start to seed some of these conversations in the forum. So I hope you'll join the network and get involved in the forum. We'd love to see all of your responses there. So before we get started, I want to quickly, with Greg, I want to quickly introduce our panel to all of you today. Greg Gearhart is our first speaker, a longtime friend of the Internet of Water, and a champion for the Internet of Water work and other water data modernization efforts in California. Greg is the Deputy Director of the Office of Information Management and Analysis at the California State Water Resources Control Board. And most importantly about Greg, for those of you who don't know, his best qualifications is he makes fantastic paella. So I don't know if you ever get a chance to visit Greg, you should strong arm him into making some for you. We have Sam Hermit, who is also a longtime friend of the IoW. Sam has roots in North Carolina, but makes her home in Texas. And for that, we do forgive her in North Carolina. She has been a leader in Texas to establish the first Texas Water Data Hub. Sam is the Assistant Deputy Executive Administrator for Water Science and Conservation at the Texas Water Development Board, and thrilled to have Sam with us today. And finally, the IoW first met Stacy Timmons at the very beginning of our startup period, right at the heels of the passage of the New Mexico Water Data Act. Stacy is the Associate Director of Hydrogeology Programs at the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources. Stacy and her agency are leads for the New Mexico Water Data Initiative, and she is the chief cat herder, one of the best I've ever seen actually at agency collaboration, and done an extraordinary job in getting an entire state initiative off the ground and working in 6 short months. So we are so lucky to have all 3 of them working with us and believe that all of you will appreciate hearing what's going on in their states. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg and let Greg talk to you about California.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, everyone at the Internet of Water. It's a great honor to be able to do this presentation. I'm also here on behalf of the whole state of California partner agency team, which I'll get to in a minute, but it's also an honor to be a representative of all the collective work that our collaborative team in California has done in the last few years. Next slide, please. So on this slide, actually, what I'd like to ask is if you could click that link, and I'll just walk through a product that we have here that is an implementation journal that describes the latest updates on our efforts in California. So my experience with working with the state of California partners has been absolutely incredible, and so this is a great way to sort of see it. The history of this project is that in 2016, there was a statute enacted in California that requires a number of named state agencies to produce open water data by way of platforms. And along the way, there were some other milestones, including establish a strategic plan and deliver the actual platform. And in this case, we used two. And then federal data should be federated was the last milestone that we just went through. So this journal, this data journal, story map via Esri is a great way to sort of interact with it. I'm not going to read this. I just want to demonstrate that there's some good content here. So if you could scroll down, that would be great. So like many places in the West, water has always been a really critical resource, and this decision-making and governance around it has been extremely charged, making the data and the transparency of that data, supporting those water decision-making processes very also vital and charged. So in California, this is an ongoing thing. It wasn't just a whim to produce. We're actually the only topic in California that has an open data platform mandate via statute. And so there are other state agencies that do voluntary open data sharing, but we are the one that's named because probably reflecting that sort of importance. The implementing agencies, the lead of this is the Department of Water Resources. That's a separate water agency in California than the one that I work for. I work for an organization called the California Water Boards. It's 10 boards, and each of our board members on those 10 boards is appointed by our governor. So we have 68 seats that are in charge of our agency, but the other department, Department of Water Resources, is more of a traditional pyramid-shaped department that answers to actually a different resource agency, a different secretary in the cabinet. So we have a really complex water governance world in the first place, and then add the water data governance, and it became, as you can imagine, even more complex because a lot of the data is held and stewarded by others, local agencies, federal agencies, private entities. So this presented a real challenge, but the overcoming of it by the leadership of the Department of Water Resources and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, Debbie Franco and Chris McCready, and Camiar Gavechi, and many others. The other sort of state agency that's named besides the two I've mentioned were the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then the California Water Quality Monitoring Council is named. There's also a lot of voluntary partners in the state agency that have joined this partnership. And I'll get to some recent developments in the expansion of that partnership. Scroll down, please. You can just keep scrolling through this. The federation idea is really complex. And I was the one that asked for a topic on that, sorry. But basically one of the ways we tried to talk about federation was to initially publish on two different platforms. We have this sort of interesting scenario in California where the state of California operates data.ca.gov, and the water boards had been publishing our open data even prior to the statute on that platform. When the mandate came out for the department, and as I mentioned, they're under a separate agency secretary position, they decided in a really sort of collective decision-making way to also publish on a CNRA California Natural Resources Agency platform. And that's what's being shown in the screen here. The idea was that if we could publish on two different platforms and harvest each other's metadata and basic names of our data sets and our resources, we would be able to test federation along the way rather than make federation sort of this nebulous test down the road. So that was actually the intent, and it worked out quite well. So we worked out a lot of the protocols for at least sharing resources across these two different platforms. Next, if you could scroll down, please, that'd be great. And this is the other one, and you could just keep scrolling. The most recent requirement on the statute, and the last one really, was that by August 1 of this year, we were to start hosting federal data sets. The way that the statute is set up is it doesn't really specifically name data sets or federal agencies, whether it's state data or federal data. It doesn't really put a finger on exactly what it intends us to do. So there's this iterative approach to it where we were, even prior to this deadline, making some federal data sets available, but we've done a lot of work recently to get these named federal data sets here up and accessible in California. If you scroll down, please. This is the most recent development that's really exciting under leadership of many, our board chair, Joaquin Esquivel, to name a few. There has been the formation of a new water data consortium. That water data consortium has also been blessed by having Tara Moran be the first inaugural president and chief executive officer. And she's doing an amazing job of getting that consortium up and running. The idea behind this is, in my mind, a bit of a conceptual model to think of a three-legged stool. We have data, and we have users, and then we have a governance system that tries to make that whole thing work. And so this new water data consortium presented a bit of a supplement to the governance thing that makes essentially that system accountable for not just publishing water data, but publishing water data that's useful, making sure that it's the right data, that there's data quality issues that are being addressed, streamlining. One of their first projects is to address streamlining of reporting of data. So that's really exciting to us. Scroll down, please. So we have a strategic plan, as I mentioned. You don't have to read it, but it's actually quite a good strategic plan, in my opinion. It has three basic goal areas. One is make sure that the data are sufficient, make the data accessible, make it useful, and then most importantly, make it used. So you can sort of see the life cycle of data sort of thought through in this setting out of our goals. And then here's just some quick updates, and I won't go through them all, but you guys can do this later if you'd like. So if you scroll down, please. One of them is inventories, and we have two different dashboards, or multiple dashboards really, looking at the inventories that are being produced. These are iterative, and we're working on better ways to communicate it. But these links will be provided, and you can click through it at your leisure. Scroll down, please. And then, of course, the most important thing is the data. So we also are constantly trying to review what kinds of legacy data sets we need to prioritize to make more accessible, as well as publishing and iterating and refining some of the products. And I'll just give you one quick example in our world is we produce a lot of water quality data out of a database in California called the California Environmental Data Exchange Network, CEDN. Out of that data set, for example, there's a chemistry data set. And the chemistry data set includes fields that relate to data quality, depending on what kinds of expectations were set, objectives and what have you. But just having those fields on data quality turned out to be not very useful. So we built an algorithm that produces essentially categorization of bins of different levels of data quality so that we run these different fields through that algorithm, and it produces two new fields in our published data set that has the score of the bin so that you could filter by which scores you want. But it also has another field that includes any analysis comments that came through in that algorithm that would sort of justify why it fell into the bin 1, 2, 3, or 4, or what have you. So that was a sort of a value added effort in the publishing step that you wouldn't get if you just got the raw data. Scroll down, please. We're very user focused, and I'm going to talk about this more from the slides. So if you could switch me back to the slideshow, that would be great. And next slide, please. So next slide, please. We do a lot of civic engagement. We call it civic data engagement specifically because this is kind of like the new way. Datathons, hackathons, civic tech, civic engagement. These are all terms of art that we've been exposed to and working in. So next slide, please. These are just some of the examples of the things that we do. We hold water data fairs. We do an annual science symposium that is all focused on data science, essentially the data elements of our water quality and water resource data that's being collected in California. We have an annual data challenge. It's open right now. The deadline's been extended to February 1. I'll talk about that real quickly. And we do local datathons and other kinds of engagement. And then internally, it's important for me to mention that each one of our departments and agencies, so to speak, have a lot of work to do to improve our data literacy, as well as just make data accessible and engage our own staff and our workforces. So these are some examples of things that we do internally too. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is an example of what happens when you collaborate with amazing people. So shout out to Audie Lee Brown, who is the artist who did this, this facilitated illustration. She does these kinds of things for our events, and now virtually she does them as well. And it's really amazing when you have somebody collect information that's going along the way. And by the way, we met Audie through Meredith Lee at the West Big Data Innovation Hub. And just amazing humans, amazing resources out there. These innovation hubs are around the country, and they're ready to work with you to engage people on data. But this is a great example of a product that lives on after the event itself. It captures the spirit, the people, the topics, and what have you. Next slide. And I'll just run through these really quick. This is one that we did this summer, but you can see that this is a sort of a different thing. We had a keynote speaker that was highlighted and super inspirational to all of us. Moses West out of Texas. Sam knows him, I think, and just an amazing resource to have Audie Lee Brown capture this and sort of have it live on. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. That's just another example. These are all the partners that we worked with last year, and this year the list is probably even bigger, but this is the slide I could find. So these are just great partners with our Drinking Water Challenge in California. Next slide, please. And this is just some fun art that one of the topics that I actually have a lot of passion towards is addressing trash and macroplastics and microplastics. And these are actually really important nexus topics to the public. I have found in the last few years that this is probably the #1 issue that you can engage your public on about your data sets with regards to trash and their water resources. So we do a trash data dive every year. This is from a year ago. We actually haven't, we're postponing ours in 2020 to early 2021 because of COVID. But this is a fun thing to do, is to iterate with people around the data. It's not so much hacking, it's kind of like what you would do prior to hacking to make sure you have good data sets that can do things with. So next slide, please. And then finally, I mentioned already that we're continuing to align our inventories in this federal and federation kind of mode. And the data challenge deadline is February 1, and I am over. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. There are several questions, but we're going to hold the questions to the end. For those of you, continue to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll circle back around to those. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Sam from Texas.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Sam Hermit with the Texas Water Development Board. And I'm going to try to move through things pretty quickly so that we have an opportunity to respond to some of those questions at the end. Next slide, please. So I work for the Texas Water Development Board. We have more of the traditional pyramid setup that Greg was just describing. But what our agency does, and you can see the start of the flow and the end of the flow, is that we take water science and data and use that to develop plans, both for flood and drought, to try to mitigate the impacts and make our state more resilient in order to secure the water future of Texas. And I put this slide here, so you see a quick flow of what we do, but also so that you see that it all starts with the data. So this work in this space is incredibly important, and it's of great importance here in Texas. Next slide, please. So a quick poll to see, it's yes or no. Are you from California or New Mexico? It's pretty easy to answer. I just wanted to see who we have on our call today. So Lily, how do I see the results?
I'll just tell you the results. Right now, we've got 65% saying yes and it's down to 34% saying no right now.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and roll with that. If we can go, so California and New Mexico are the two states with legislation. So if we can go to the next slide. So for the folks who answered yes, which is about 2/3 of all participants today, you have a stick. Here's a nice little image of a stick. In other words, you have a mechanism through legislation to get folks to play along and to participate in the efforts that you're doing. For the rest of us who only represent 1/3 of the folks on this call, we also represent 48 states out of the union. And so it's the vast majority of folks that are in the same boat as Texas, which is not having a stick. If you can move to the next slide. We don't have legislation. We don't have something to make folks join into this kind of effort. And so that's both a challenge and it's an opportunity. It's a challenge because we don't have guardrails set up for us. We don't have clearly delineated thresholds that we have to meet or milestones that we have to pass. But at the same time, we have the opportunity to design and create at a pace that's appropriate for our stakeholders and for our users. And so that's something that I think that we can capitalize on, and as a network of peers would really like to support each other with. If you can go to the next slide, please. So in Texas, we've got a lot of different efforts taking place in the water data space. I don't have graphics for all of them, so I just put one simple graphic here for us to look at. We've got the city of Bernie that's developing the first municipal water data hub that we're aware of. So we're collaborating with them to try to bring that into a state hub, which we're starting to develop in Texas. We have folks at Texas A&M University who are building a disaster information system to bring water data and other types of data together to lead to better response and preparedness for disasters. We have folks at UT Austin pulling information together to try to, in a one water kind of sense, look at the full cycle of water availability in Texas rather than looking at the hydrologic cycle in disparate pieces. We have our Texas Parks and Wildlife Department that's working on decision support tools for environmental flows. So we have a long list of water data efforts. That's just a few of them. But one important thing that we're doing is trying to start actually a water data hub for Texas. So Greg showed you what they've been working on there. They already had some things in place and they're literally years ahead. And Stacy's going to talk to you about what's happened in New Mexico. Well, we're in the very beginning, the sort of forming and storming stages of that same kind of process. And I can show you real quickly how we're going about doing it in Texas. But one thing I do want to note is that while we don't have legislation, we did have support from the legislature to get this effort going. In Texas, we have the saying, and it's probably folks other places use it too, never let a good disaster go to waste. And most important changes in the water space in Texas have come about as a result of a significant drought or a significant flood. We have both of them at sort of biblical scale in Texas. And I know that's true in some other states as well. And those moments, those events in our history have really shaped water policy in Texas. And so after Hurricane Harvey, our agency received additional resources to support a lot of different flood efforts, but part of that is to go to supporting the development of a water data hub so that water data resources and information can be better, more interoperable, more usable to improve decision-making in the flood space and then in other sectors of the flood, the water universe as well. So next slide, please. So if you're going to start something like this and you don't have legislation, what do? Where do you start? Well, I would say the first thing you do is you pick up a phone and you call a friend. If you're undertaking something major and new in your life, you're probably going to talk to somebody about it before you get very far down the road. And so that's exactly what we're doing right now in Texas. We're picking up the phone or doing a Zoom call to talk to colleagues like Greg, like Stacy, folks in Colorado, folks at the federal level about what the work that they have done in this space, what they've learned and how it's going. So if you move to the next slide, please. This is a little bit about what that process actually looks like. And this is the kind of process tool that we could easily share with folks from other states so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. So you can see that it's got 4 steps: discover, define, develop, and deliver. And this is just to lay the foundation for a hub, not to actually, to sort of start the getting the building blocks in place, but not to get to the end goal. And so what we're starting with is conversation. Next slide, please. And so you can see those 2 little red arrows. We're talking, as I mentioned, to subject matter experts in states who have already done this, and at the federal level, folks who have already done this, and trying to, you know, get lessons learned from them, not reinvent the wheel, and understand what they would do differently if they could. Because having legislation, it prompts you, but it also constrains you. So if they didn't have those constraints, what would they do? And that's really incredible information that's going to inform our process as we move forward. So just to wrap up, last slide, please. This is just a quote from one of our board members who is a really significant advocate for water data and the important role that it plays in the water space. And I just want to stress that really it's about relationship, and that moving efforts forward, you know, we're really not constrained by technology. It's not IT, it's not having the right frameworks or being able to develop the architecture that's needed. Those things are challenging and difficult, but the most important thing is having the relationships that are needed to convince folks that they should participate in what you're doing, to convince folks that they should support what you're doing, and to convince folks that they should provide the resources that are necessary to develop tools. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over so we can hear from Stacy. Thanks, everyone.
And now we're going to turn it over to Stacy Timmons from New Mexico. And just remind, yep, okay, you're off mute now. Okay.
Good. Great. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. So I will try to really quickly just give you a preview of what we've been doing in New Mexico, and you can stay tuned for a March lengthier discussion on this with an upcoming webinar. So I'm a hydrogeologist. I jumped into the water data sphere a few years ago, specifically as new legislation passed. You can go to the next slide. In New Mexico, we have a Water Data Act, which was modeled similar to California, a little bit shorter, probably a bit spicier, I like to say. And I appreciate Sam's reference to having a stick that basically says that we'll work together to share our data, integrate it, and manage it in a better way than we've previously done. There are 5 agencies named that specifically have to participate, and our agency, the New Mexico Bureau of Geology, is named as the convener of that. And I think what's important about this piece of legislation is how it came to be, which is a bipartisan, multiple different types of advocates, from cattle growers to Sierra Club, were supporting this legislation, because I think it really highlights the fact that having water data in a desert state like New Mexico is important. And maybe instead of a stick, we need a very spiky cholla cactus to really encourage the participation for people with this. But it has been, I think, so far a success in building the conversations around water data. Next slide. So in the first year of the legislation, there were a number of deadlines, which I think was an additional part of our there was quite a bit of challenge, but this was an additional stick that basically moved things along as quick as it could be. In the first 6 months, we were asked to put together a data platform and set up some data standards. identify a bunch of our data and also the available and unavailable data. And then shortly thereafter, in April, put together a plan that identifies our overall goals, targets, metrics, and the budgetary resources needed. And I think that having those deadlines, while during the year was extremely difficult to accomplish, I think it's important to have legislation that really launches people into success for this. Next slide. As with many things in New Mexico, I think we learned to make do with a fairly small budget. So in this case, we did get some funding from the legislature to launch this effort, which I'm happy to say has been basically a catalyst for growth. So we've been able to bring in other philanthropic funding and Bureau of Reclamation funding to go toward a Water Smart grant. So over the next 3 years, an additional $300,000 of federal funds. And that's an interesting project because it's a small pilot project that really helps us to learn the process and then share that out with other states in the West in particular. Next slide. So I'm just gonna reiterate, I think, a few of the points that others have made. The idea here is that we're not building another database. We're not trying to smush everybody's data into one space, but rather we're federating data. So that means that the agencies that already produce this data, that already share it in some way, we're making it more machine readable, more easily accessible to integrate with other data. And we're doing that kind of following this model here in the image. A lot more of this information can be found in our plan, which is hosted online on the website. I'll have at the end of the presentation here. But the idea here is that we're building connections using APIs. And so the concept of just chucking the data at us and throwing it over the fence is really not what we're aiming to do. Next slide. There have been a number of successes in this effort, a lot of challenges as well. But I'll just kind of highlight a few of the points here, which is that we've been able to leverage some of the work that was already done in our state, particularly with state water planning, to inventory data sets. So we were able to then bring those already inventoried data sets into an online data catalog. And we do that to basically illuminate the data that are available and also archive the metadata that go with it. And that data catalog is kind of our starting point to then connecting to agencies and other data using those APIs. The website that we've set up, if you just go to newmexicowaterdata.org, you can check it out and see some of the different resources and data sets that we've linked up there. I think one of the biggest successes through this effort has really just been thinking about those agencies that are required to participate and getting them to start to work together. We have multiple working groups, a technical and a directing agencies working group, especially, that the people are coming to these conversations, mostly online meetings now, to talk about their data challenges and to really figure out how they're going to work through this together. And so this is definitely a multi-year effort, and we're at the beginning of it. So check back on it over the next few years. Next slide. So I just want to highlight the kind of efforts of the kind of this peer-to-peer network, as well as multiple agencies that are participating in the New Mexico Water Data Initiative. When we first launched the Water Data Act, I think there was some mental picture in my head, at least, that we'd be able to bring on a unicorn type person, someone who knew how to do all this stuff. In fact, unicorns really don't exist, so we're building our own. And so we've been able to do that by piecing together different people and teams. And I think all of the people listed on this slide here, all of the different organizations, have contributed in some way to helping New Mexico move forward on this water data legislation. So no one person can do it. You've got to build your own unicorn. I think that's all I have for today, and I'm happy to talk more about it in the March event and see what kind of questions we have today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Stacy. So for the panelists, if you all want to turn your cameras on, there are a few questions in the Q&A that I think maybe we should address before we move forward to the other questions. One question, Greg, is in California, is federating data and making it available through a unified API part of the current strategy?
Yeah, that's on the horizon. So, I mean, depending on like how you mean federating and how you mean unified, but the current platforms that we use in California, both of them are CCAN products that provide APIs for all the resources that are available. I would say the CNRA one is probably a little more robust and optimized for some of the data sets that are there because they have more control over that entire platform. But API development is ongoing. We actually are also talking about APIs and some of that web service and technological solutions to our federation strategy, which would probably build a different interface that would sort of allow users to more easily discover and then connect an API to their tool or what have you.
Great, thanks. And another question, also, I guess before I move forward the other questions, if we don't get to your question here on the webinar, we'll move these questions over to the forum under the webinar so that the panelists can answer directly and you can go there and see the answer to your question. But for all three of you, how are you dealing with, if you're dealing with mostly data sourced from agencies and institutions, how are you thinking about data from, consultants' reports and other sources outside of those agencies and institutions?
I can speak for Texas. A lot of consultant reports are developed in collaboration with agencies here. So a lot of times, an agency contracts with a consultant to do a particular project. And so that work, be it a groundwater availability model that's contracted for or a research study, the information isn't just with the consultant, it's also with the entity that did the contracting. So I think we'll be connected to a lot of those resources, but then we'll be looking to identify other data sources and how those can be brought in. So we, by all means, do not want to leave out the critical work that's done by the consulting community. But I think there is actually a pretty good nexus there already in Texas, at least for a lot of that work.
I would just add from the New Mexico perspective, and perhaps, I don't know if California is doing this as well, but the data catalog that we have set up with CCAN is pretty capable of hosting any kind of data. So far, we haven't gotten a whole lot of shared data in an electronic form from consultants, but I think we would be open to listing that as a data source on our CCAN site and perhaps working on improved connections if consultants or other non-agency entities want to share the data.
Yeah, it's very similar in California, Stacy. I think what we envisioned, we're the regulatory agency, and so the data sets that we put up are also other people's data that might have to be submitted via a regulatory process. So that's kind of our mode, and so it changes our ability to sort of work voluntarily a lot of times. But and we have talked about whether the state's data portals should be places for non-state data. The mandate that we have is for state data, not for all data. And federal data, I should mention. But the other thought is, I think there was a question about the curated data sets for decision making. And I think that's really important to sort of talk about too. We're actually trying to go there in the near future with making sure that the data that's used in a tool or decision making process by way of a tool, that data, the exact curated and authorized or authoritative data is also available on these platforms.
Yeah, Greg, thank you. That was the next question I have in line. And I think it's something we've heard several times, which is, the data sets being produced at multiple levels of quality. And it would be beneficial to have, or how are you dealing with this, spectrum of data quality, particularly with regard to supporting policy decisions? So I think that's come up in several of our projects as well. And I would just be curious what all of you have been thinking about with regard to how you would do that.
how to deal with data quality issues?
Well, are you going to do a data tiering, quality tiering? How are you going to notify users of the different data quality standards, or, so that people know when they get data, basically what QA/QC it's followed?
Yeah, I think in our case, it's such an early phase of this. We're expecting, and I think that was a few slides back on mine. It's just that the data that are being produced are already QC'd and QA'd. It'd be interesting to come up with maybe that's a reference to machine learning, some other way to kind of compare data sets in an automated way. But I presently don't have a firm plan on a QA/QC process on our New Mexico data.
Yeah, and I think there's just so many weeds to get in rabbit holes and whatever metaphors to go down with the data quality thing. But I think the very first step is to make the data accessible and transparent so that people can see if there are any data quality issues. Not all data quality is collected under quality assurance plans. In fact, very little of it in California is. Most of our water quality data that's done by way of sort of study and research and monitoring kind of approaches is. But that's just one element of the data that we have. So I think when it comes to a state or any entity, and this is where I think we really learn a lot from each other as states in these peer-to-peer networks, what is being done in different parts of the country could be transported, because at the end of the day, the usability of the data will be dictated by that data quality. But the reverse is true, that not all data that's useful has to be completely QC'd and meet all the objectives. There's always use in some cases, in my opinion, for the data to turn into information.
That's a great point. Sam, I just want to give you the opportunity to jump in there if you had anything to add.
Yeah, we're not far enough along yet to really have made decisions regarding how we're going to, address data quality issues. I do know that having robust metadata just up front is important, so folks know whether or not QA/QC has taken place, and if so, what that looked like. And I do agree with Greg's point that the resolution and how the extent of the QA/QC, it can vary in terms of what the end use of the data is, in terms of exactly what you're looking for. So it doesn't have to have gone through the most robust QA/QC process to have value, but the value is very different at different levels of QA/QC. And so we haven't gotten yet to how we're going to work that out with our internal system. Not internal system, our state system.
So we are at the top of the hour, but we have a couple of other questions left here in the box that I think would be great. I don't know if you three panelists have just 5 more minutes or so just to walk through those. And if you don't, then what we'll do is move them all over to the forum. We good? I'll go ahead and if those of you can stay on, stay on. And remember that we will be posting all of this material. Let me move forward to the last slide so you can see. You can pick up this conversation at the Internet of Water Forum that Lily showed you earlier, but we will also be sending out the videos and slide links. So I wanted to quickly address 2 questions that were in the Q&A for those of you. One question is about any specific environmental GIS software that are helping you compile metadata and address the data issues that you have. Software questions seem to come up frequently too, and it's one of the reasons we added that section in the forum, so people could start thinking about who's using what software and what are their benefits and challenges.
Yeah, I was just going to reply, but the state of California has, as you can imagine, a pretty robust Esri user group and license. In fact, we even have an open geospatial platform that is a 3rd open data platform in California, and it's all geospatial data. So the data sets that we put on our local Esri and ArcGIS platforms migrates upwards into this open data environment via the Esri product. But using it for metadata is probably a next step in some cases. We actually do a project in mind where we would maybe try to use that to sort of describe some of the data quality issues with our hydrologic basins and or other kinds of boundary kind of data sets like public water system boundaries for drinking water or stormwater collection boundaries. All these are data sets that are emerging as important that probably could use some sort of geospatial tool to describe metadata issues.
Stacy or Sam, you have any thoughts on softwares, particularly with regard to spatial data, GIS data that you're?
I think I would echo a lot of the comments that Greg made. A lot of the Esri products are probably the more commonly used software, though we're trying to make the data that are being shared in a more kind of platform agnostic setup. So using GeoJSON instead of shapefiles, for example, so that they can be used in multiple other services. And I think what we're building in New Mexico is largely using open source tools. So the CCAN site and the Sensor Things API are all free. Code people have to work on it a little bit more, but those aren't specifically software packages, but that's been our main solution for right now.
And in Texas, we are not at the point yet that we're identifying the software that we're going to be using. I mean, in general, we also use a lot of Esri products, AppGeo, really a wide variety, a lot of things that are open source. It depends on the particular data set and what we're doing with it, but that's just really specific to our agency in terms of what we're developing for the Texas Water Data Hub. That is a very open conversation at this point.
Okay, I think we'll stop it there because we're over time, but I wanted to make sure we got some of those last couple of questions in. Thank all of you for attending and all of our panelists for your presentations and also your thoughtful responses. And again, we will send out an email link with the video and the slides. And you will also be able to go over to the IoW Forum where most of these questions will be transferred that we weren't able to get to during the webinar. But otherwise, thank you so much for attending and we hope you all have a great weekend.